Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Oath Keepers is a non-partisan association of current and former serving military, police, and first responders. Members pledge to fulfill the oath all military and police take to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution states, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Oath keepers assert that the oath they take was to the U.S. Constitution, not to elected politicians. Oath keepers state that they will not obey unconstitutional orders. Unconstitutional orders include orders to disarm the American people, to conduct warrantless searches, or detain Americans as enemy combatants in violation of their ancient right to jury trial. Our guest today is Sam Andrews, a leading member of the St. Louis branch of the Oath Keepers organization. Mr. Andrews' name came to the media's attention in late November, early December 2014, when he and other Oath Keepers stood a post defending buildings in Ferguson, Missouri from looters and arsonists. Some in law enforcement and in the media thought they should not be in Ferguson. Today, we will discuss why Oath Keepers were in Ferguson and what they accomplished. Sam Andrews, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you came. First of all, Oath Keepers, that's something that most people, unless they are nerds, really don't know about, because they're not, the name of your organization has not been in the papers a whole bunch. And the way I got to know you was that I attended a lecture that you gave in which you described what it was that Oath Keepers were doing in Ferguson. And so it was like, oh, this is interesting. I thought I'd have you come on the show and discuss that. But before we get to that part, how long have you been associated with Oath Keepers and what brought you to them?
A couple of years. And what brought me to them was it was one of the few organizations that was focused on keeping the law, not violating our laws. And I have tremendous respect for the Founding Fathers and the Bill of Rights and the structure of government that they laid out to help protect our freedoms.
When you say what you just said, you indicate that there are people who are not following the laws. Am I reading you right?
Yes, there's a number of politicians, both federal, state, and local, that seem to have no respect for our system and our laws, and they do whatever they want and whatever they think they can get away with.
And you were aware of this before you joined Oath Keepers?
On many levels.
Mm-hmm. And that's the reason that you began, or that you joined up?
Yeah, I liked where the direction the organization was going and that they were asking our servicemen, our military, and our law enforcement to keep their oaths and honor our laws, which start with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Did I do a good job of explaining what Oath Keepers is during the introduction? Does that cover it, or is there more that you want to say about the organization that I didn't cover?
Well, it's not just unconstitutional orders. We want men in the military and in our law enforcement agencies to refuse illegal orders. You can get an illegal order from your boss as an officer, such as what happened in Ferguson. And it may not be an unconstitutional order, but it's still unlawful because you have state and local laws you need to follow as well.
It's hard, though, for for a regular police officer, for a military member who is getting orders from the chain of command to suddenly say, oh gosh, I'm having to differentiate between this and that. It's something that can get you in the military easily court-martialed for not following a lawful order.
Well, the interesting thing about our military is they have tremendous protections. If they're given an illegal order and they're prosecuted for not following that order, they bring the order to light, it's determined that it's illegal, and the person who gave the order is then prosecuted. Our law enforcement officers in Missouri don't have the same protections, and that's something we're working on with the Missouri legislature to try and fix.
Now, that's something that we're going to get into as part of this discussion of Ferguson, which I guess is where we ought to go to next, because during your lecture, I heard you say that there were certain police officers who were giving illegal orders, and that you found that offensive.
Well, to our men in Ferguson, at the locations where we were guarding people, 50 police officers showed up early Saturday morning about 1 a.m.
Well, before we get to that part, let's go back to the beginning. How is it, or why is it, that your organization wound up in Ferguson? You don't live in Ferguson, do you?
Not right now.
Okay, so how did you wind up being in Ferguson during the middle of these riots?
Well, on Monday night, the night of the grand jury announcement, Nixon had publicly proclaimed that he would have guard to help St. Louis County Police protect the town.
The governor of the state of Missouri.
Yeah. Governor Nixon promised to have National Guard there the second time around to support the police, protect the people and their property and their rights. And so we went to sleep on Monday evening early thinking that Nixon would do his job. We woke up Tuesday morning to the horror of the media and what they showed about the burning and the destruction in Ferguson. My wife was actually watching a tape from CNN about Natalie the baker in Ferguson at Natalie's Cakes and More, and she was telling the person in the interview that she couldn't afford to feed her kids if she couldn't open her doors in the morning. And my wife looked at me and she said, "You know how to help this woman, you get up there and help her."
Oh, how interesting. It was your wife then?
My wife was watching the video and said, "This is crazy, you need to go help her." And I said, "Be careful what you wish for." And she said, "No, you need to do it." And I said, "Okay, see you in a few weeks or a month." She said, "That's fine, just get the job done." And so we decided to put a team together and go up and guard those people that the government refused to guard and protect.
So you made some phone calls to other members?
I did. Initially, I made some phone calls to some friends that are in SWAT and in the military, and I made some phone calls to some oath keepers, and I put together a team of highly skilled men to go up and protect those people that the government refused to protect.
So these were trained individuals, not just some, as was described by the media, some wild, country bumpkin hicks running around with guns.
Highly trained men. You know, Chief Belmer of St. Louis County said that he needed to arrest us and remove us from the area because we didn't have security licenses. And he had his public relations person put out a bunch of garbage in the media about our men. And the simple fact is, a MARSOC Marine has a lifetime of training. The license Belmer was demanding that we show that we had to remain on site was 16 hours of training, basically a St. Louis County mall cop.
Which all of these highly trained people had, years of training.
We find that laughable, that our Marines guard our nuclear subs. They're more than qualified to guard people in Ferguson and more qualified in a security operation than most police officers.
So on Tuesday, after things were done burning from Monday night, your team arrived there?
We did. We showed up with multiple pickup trucks and beds full of plywood and screws and cordless drills, and we basically laid plywood over windows for 5 straight hours.
How did you get in there? I mean, the police had that area pretty well cordoned off where people were simply not allowed. Traffic was diverted around that Main Street area.
We drove right up Main Street. It wasn't blocked when we got there about 11 a.m. in the morning.
I see. So that must have happened later on.
And we would have driven around them even if they had blocked the streets, honestly.
So then you went in and you started helping people by boarding up their buildings.
We got rid of the broken glass, we swept up the place, we boarded up buildings for several blocks and tried to put the buildings in a more defendable position. That was the first thing we did.
So not the burned ones, you were working with the ones that still were not burned, but had been.
Well, they had tried to burn these buildings down, but the buildings that we were guarding had sprinkler systems in it, so they were flooded from the Molotov cocktails being thrown through the windows. But they weren't burnt to the ground. The sprinkler system had put out the fires.
Mm-hmm. So then what? So now we're starting to get towards Tuesday evening.
Yes.
What happens then?
Well, we decided to take our manpower and to guard people. And the media put out that we were there to guard buildings and businesses. The truth is, we had apartments on the second floor of the businesses. And we posted most of our men around those apartments to guard those people. They'd been come very close to being burned out the night before and murdered in a fire. Mm-hmm. And so we posted some men around the base of the building where the businesses were, but most of our armed men and firemen were up on the rooftops guarding the apartments that were on the second story.
Mm-hmm. Now, initially, though, you were saying that the police or the media were saying these negative things about you, but initially, weren't you welcomed by the people who were in the area?
Well, initially we weren't welcomed by the majority of the people in the area. The protesters were walking by and swearing at us and calling us the effing KKK and the effing police, that type of thing. But we won the people over. We got down on the street, explained to them who we were and why we were there, and then they were very thankful that we were there.
Mm-hmm. So that was also on Tuesday, or is that now Wednesday?
That was Wednesday.
Right.
Tuesday night was pretty rough for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And then, so Wednesday, you're there, or you and a bunch of other men are up on the roofs of a number of buildings that had not been burned previously, but looting had been attempted there.
Well, they tried to burn us out Tuesday night, and my men would grab the incendiary devices that they were throwing onto the flat tar roofs, and we would throw them in a bucket of water. Or if they threw a Molotov cocktail on the roof, we would hit it with a fuel fire extinguisher and then dump some water from buckets that were pre-staged to cool the roof.
You guys sound like you knew what you were doing.
We knew exactly what we were doing. As a matter of fact, we guarded those buildings for less than $1,500 for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Nixon spent $15 million and let over 400 buildings get damaged and 24 of them burnt to the ground.
We'll divert here for just a second because you have strong opinions, so let's just go there. Why do you think that your services were needed instead of the people who had been hired to do the job by the state and municipalities?
Well, the National Guard was supposed to be there. They weren't there. They were in downtown Clayton. They were stuck at the airport being held up by Governor Nixon, but they weren't in Ferguson. And the reason we had to be there is very simply the government didn't do their job. The people that were charged with protecting the town and those people didn't do it. They refused to do it. As a matter of fact, the Department of Justice ordered the police not to arrest arsonists and looters. Our own federal government ordered the police to not do what the taxpayers paid for specifically.
And you know this how?
Because multiple police that were in the meetings, the briefing meetings where the rules of engagement were laid out, have all told me this. And from St. Louis County to small-time organizations to highway patrolmen have all told me the same exact story.
That they were told?
They were ordered by the Department of Justice to not arrest looters or arsonists.
What was the thought process there? What was the Department of Justice thinking they were going to accomplish by telling the police to behave this way?
I have no idea. They abrogated their number one responsibility, which is to protect people's life, liberty, and property, and the Department of Justice deliberately chose a strategy they knew would not do that. To me, that's criminal endangerment.
Well, we saw this also in Baltimore many, many months after that, I forget, Freddie Gray, was that his name?
Yeah, poor Freddie Gray.
Yeah, the guy who died and set off a whole looting spree in Baltimore, and I believe it was not the Department of Justice, but it was their own mayor or prosecutor who ordered.
Well, you have to understand, when you have a democratically controlled Department of Justice, a democratically controlled governor, and a Democrat for a mayor, all this stuff funnels very neatly right down the chain of command to the police department that's in the city.
Of Baltimore.
Of Baltimore. Same thing, same players.
Right.
Just a different mayor and a different governor, but Democrats.
Now, coming back to Ferguson, I heard, this is months afterward, I heard former Chief Tom Jackson talking, and he said basically what you said, that that the National Guard were promised to him, and it was only, I think it was that day of the decision that suddenly word came down, no, they're not coming. And he was pretty shocked by that.
Well, Tom Jackson got the word late. The governor's office sent an email to Chief Belmer's office of St. Louis County more than 11 days before the grand jury announcement, telling him that the National Guard would not be in Ferguson. And Chief Belmer objected privately, but didn't object publicly. And a constitutionally elected sheriff accountable to the people would have objected publicly before the incidents. But Belmer is a politically appointed police chief, and so he kept quiet and allowed the people of Ferguson to burn.
Now, this is the part where you wanted to say that, that you're working in Jefferson City to make some changes to the law.
Yes, our military men are protected. Our military men, if you're given an illegal order and you follow it, you will be prosecuted. You're expected to refuse illegal orders. But our policemen in Missouri are at-will employees with no protection at all. So when their chief, like a politically appointed person like Belmer, gives them an illegal or unconstitutional order, if they don't follow it, they'll be fired and they'll be blacklisted and they won't work as a policeman ever again in the area. Mm-hmm. And their lives are financially ruined at that point. And we need to give our policemen around the country, not just in Missouri, the same protections we give our military in the Military Code of Justice.
And that language would be, I mean, are people working, have language actually been developed? Has it been presented to the legislature, or are they still talking about, well, let's try to do it?
We're trying to get Senator Schaefer and a Representative Kurtman to draft the legislation in an ironclad way so that our policemen have legitimate protection if they refuse an illegal order. You know, I was ordered to do that is the same excuse the people at Nuremberg gave for murdering Jewish people.
Right.
We've got to get the order takers out of the system, reward those that do it right, and punish those that are giving illegal orders and that are following illegal orders.
But I tell you, I mean, you know, being former military, it can get very confusing when you're getting, you know, from a lawful superior orders to make a decision on your own. To, you know, many of these guys simply are unwilling to do it. They're trained to follow the chain of command. You know that.
Well, the military also gets some training in how not to follow an illegal order. There's a process that you go through if you're given an illegal order that you've refused. Mm-hmm. And once an officer realizes that his men are standing up to him and not willing to follow an illegal order, particularly if it's a senior NCO, generally they'll back off.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were earlier trying to tell a portion of this story, and you kind of jumped ahead, so I held you back. Now we're gonna come to it. So, initially, the people were unhappy. The people on the street were unhappy with you. Thought you were a bunch of KKK types.
That's what the media told them, and they believed it initially.
And then you won them over by actually talking to them and showing what you were actually there to do.
Yeah, we went down on the street, we explained to them why we were there, we hugged them, we gave them prayers, copies of prayers for the people of Ferguson, we passed out Oath Keepers cards, we told them we were there to protect everyone's right and help everyone be safe, and we respected their right to protest, which is a First Amendment right, and we didn't agree with law enforcement abuses. Freddie Gray's situation would be a grotesque example of law enforcement abuse. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the shooting in Ferguson was. I think that may have been a justified shooting, but each case is individual. Mm-hmm. But after Wednesday afternoon, the word got out in social media, hey, these guys are here to protect the people of Ferguson, something the police had not done, and all the police had done was protect the firehouse and the police station.
Now, you said that the police, by Wednesday, even they were being friendly towards you.
The police had always been friendly to us up until Thursday evening.
Now, that's where we're going to. Okay, so now we're into Thursday. Something changed. What happened?
Well, one of my MARSOC Marines noticed some federal snipers unloading their gear from a Suburban and going to a house, inside a house just west of the police station. Well, we watched them set up urban hides in the bedroom windows, and they started pointing their rifles at our men. So I called 911 and reported it, and sure enough, within minutes, St. Louis County Police showed up and said, "We don't have a team there." And we said, "Yes, you do. It's a federal team, and your highway patrolmen are on the firehouse, and the Missouri highway patrolmen are pointing their sniper rifles at our men as well." And a lot of misinformation and misdirection came out of the police after about 45 minutes of discussion with Unified Command about what was actually going on. But the sergeants and below, they were high-fiving us, thanking us for spotting the feds that didn't communicate their position, and they said they didn't want the feds there, that they didn't communicate well with the rest of the security team and the police, and that they wished they'd leave Ferguson.
Mm-hmm. But they were outside of the control of local police?
Absolutely. They were running the show. The Department of Justice was running the show from the very top, calling all the shots.
And the local people, including Chief Belmar, who is in charge of St. Louis County policing, he had nothing to say of this.
He did not take a stand for the people of Ferguson.
Okay.
He let those people burn.
So then now we're to the point you have snipers, federal snipers pointing weapons in your direction.
308 rifles, yeah.
And you reported this, there was conversations about it. Was it generally finally, oh yes, they are there? Did that finally come out?
No, they lied to us, and one of the lieutenants, Lieutenant Lohr, said, "Well, my wife knows the woman that lives in that house, and she has a barbecue business. What you guys saw were her 3 sons carrying in black barbecue pots. It wasn't really snipers with black drag bags. Except for the fact that I'm a trained sniper and I build sniper weapons and design them, and I design bags that they're carried in, and I know exactly what they look like." He might have had a prayer. But then I asked him, "Where is the woman in the house? Is she white or black?" And the lieutenant said, "Oh, she's white." And I said, "Are her sons white or black?" And she said, "Well, of course they're white." Well, we saw 3 black men carrying in rifles in drag bags and setting their rifles on bipods on tables in the windows. And we know what we saw. And we knew they were lying. Mm-hmm. And all of St. Louis County Police knew we knew they were lying. Mm-hmm. And they were actually on the ground celebrating that we outed their position.
Mm-hmm. Then came a moment of confrontation. Talk about that.
That was late Friday night, early Saturday morning. They surrounded the 3 buildings we were guarding on the east side of South Florissant, St. Louis County Police, with 50 men. And they ordered us off the roofs, and they told us they were going to take our guns, and they told us we had to leave Ferguson. Now we have a conflict. Mm-hmm. We told them, "You're here without a warrant, you're conducting an illegal act, you're violating Missouri state law 44.101, which says the police may not confiscate guns from any person in an emergency." And they were violating that law. They were violating the Second Amendment. They gave us an illegal order to disperse when we weren't doing anything wrong. We weren't committing a crime or anything. And they threatened to arrest us all. And my men stood on the roof with their weapons and said, "You need to leave. We're not going anywhere. Where's your warrant?" And the lieutenant at the time, Lieutenant Hoots, he looked at me and he said, "Sam, I'm just doing my job." I said, "You know this is illegal. You know this is not right." He says, "I'm just following orders. I only got 5 years left. And I still got a mortgage. I'm just following orders, man." He said, "And this goes way past Belmar. This goes all the way to DOJ. Mm-hmm. That's what the lieutenant told me. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, we're not going anywhere. This isn't going to go the way you think it is." And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Post-Dispatch, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which is very dishonest in their reporting, came out with a story saying that St. Louis County Police kicked Oath Keepers out of Ferguson. The truth is we never left. And you can look at an NBC story on Saturday night, we're still there. And you can look at ABC Nightline. I'm on the roof in ABC Nightline with my weapon on Saturday night, the day after they claimed they kicked us out. And that was filmed on Saturday, the day after. See, there's plenty of evidence to show that we never left.
So there were police on the ground saying you got to leave. You were still up. Well, you were down, but your men were still on the roof saying that they weren't going to leave, and eventually you didn't leave.
No, we packed up about 4 in the morning like we always do, and we went home. We came back the next day.
Okay.
We were going to keep our promise to protect the people of Ferguson, unlike Governor Nixon.
4 o'clock in the morning because most of the looters had
They're gone by
bed.
3. The drive-by shootings and the looting and stuff, they're usually over by about 3 o'clock in that environment, 3 a.m.
So here in the last 4 or 5 minutes, you've talked about the media as being dishonest, and you've had some interactions with the media, national media as well as local media,
International media even.
And so, in 3 minutes, just describe what that was and what's your reaction to what they said.
Well, I found Sky News from Great Britain to be very dishonest. They'd ask me a question, I'd give them an answer. They'd ask me another question, and then when their broadcast came out, they'd ask a question 1, and they'd play the answer that I gave to question 7, as if I was answering question 1. So I'm not very fond of Sky News, very dishonest editing and reporting. I'm actually fairly impressed with the local TV stations like Fox 2 Now and NBC, Channel 5. They did a fairly honest job, portrayed the situation pretty honestly. Completely disenchanted with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They actually printed a story as news that never happened. It was just the whole article was an outright lie. It was amazing to me.
And you said that there were some. Oh yes, you had some interaction with a fellow from ABC also.
Yes.
Yes.
ABC Nightline. Well, they asked some interesting questions, like things like, well, what do you think all these black people think of a white man walking around Ferguson with a gun? Things like that, you know, which I don't consider that reporting. That just looks like inflammatory newsmaking. It doesn't look like real reporting to me.
And did that go on the air, or that didn't?
Oh, it made the air.
Oh, it did?
Sure. It made the Nightline program. Yeah, I wasn't as impressed with the Nightline guy. And then they presented, as an alternative to the Oath Keepers position, they presented a guy in Washington, D.C., who works for a liberal organization that basically just lied about the Oath Keepers every time he opened his mouth. And he wasn't in Ferguson. He hadn't met any Oath Keepers. He didn't know anything about us.
But he got to be a spokesman for.
But he was the talking head to give the counter position to the Oath Keepers position.
Well, here in the last 30 seconds, is there anything you would like to top this off?
Well, I want everybody to know that the federal government is violating our laws and our rights. They're using devices made by Harris Corporation to tap your phones, to bedazzle cameras, to violate your First Amendment rights and violate our right to a free press. We had 3 cameras go off all in the same quarter second because an electronic device made by Harris Corporation was used to bedazzle those cameras in Ferguson. And that happened right before the police waded into the crowd to beat people and arrest people.
We're out of time. Thank you very much for your being here today. I certainly appreciate it.
Lee, thank you.
Thank you. And I've been speaking with Sam Andrews of the Oath Keepers organization. You saw that we've had their website on the television. This is going to be uploaded to YouTube. Take a look at it later on. Thanks. Goodbye.